I recently paddled a section of Australia's most important river, the Murray, with Beau Miles. Beau Miles, the YouTuber, author, and he's a long-term friend of mine. And Beau was on the Murray to film the final part of his Bad River series. I went along because I have a long-term intergenerational history with the river and have paddled it from top to bottom. Towards the end of the week, Beau and I made an on-the-water podcast about his Bad River series and about the plight of Australia's greatest asset, its rivers. After the podcast, I'll give a wrap-up about some of my thoughts about Beau's Bad River series. Here's the podcast.
So I thought what we'd do, Ponch, is being a new podcaster and thinking, geez, I'd like to have conversations in place rather than via a screen or even in a studio. Why not do podcasts out and about? And a whole bunch of people do this sort of stuff, but here we are, day 4 on the Murray, and I thought, let's have a chat. Let's make this a sort of informal, formal podcast.
Gently cruising down the Murray.
Aren't we? Yeah, isn't it beautiful? So, Brian Wattchow, long-time friend, he was my university prof, or he was my lecturer, became my PhD supervisor, then a co-worker, and now a mate. And here we are on the Murray after having guided it together for years and years, Ponch having paddled every inch of it. Brian Wattchow, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Beau. like a minor correction for your audience.
Okay.
I'm just a mere doctor, not a prof.
Yes, I forget that...
just a doctor of rivers and river travel.
That's right. Well, I forget that there is a hierarchy.
There is a pecking order.
Yeah.
So we better get it right.
Dr. Brian Wattchow, yeah, he was my supervisor for my PhD based on his big fat knowledge of rivers and place-based education. He's got a great book out called The Pedagogy of Place, written a beautiful book of poetry called The Song of the Wounded River.
Based on the journey down the Murray from top to bottom, Beau, one of your bad rivers.
Whilst I'm the front man of this Bad River series these days, it was in fact, hey, there's an Azure kingfisher. Beautiful little thing. It'll have to fly again for you to see it. There you go, see the little flip?
Yes.
Now here's our first boat of the day before we get into a hearty conversation, Ponch.
Well, we're about to be run over from behind, so.
Yeah, these are the speedboaters. There's 2 skiers on the back of a big giant tether.
And they have been running like a mighty flock of mosquitoes for the last 4 days. Here they go.
Get the hell out of the way.
So that's a big Southern 80 racing boat. They do an annual race down here.
Oh shit, oh. Here's another one.
Now that one, they're going upstream, we hardly knew that was coming. They are going past at 80 to 100k an hour.
So we're on the Murray, we're about, I don't know, 70 kilometres, 80 kilometres from Echuca, downstream, heading towards the mouth. We're heading west. It's a beautiful scene in front of us, mate. We've been out here for 4 days and we're here filming episode 4 of Bad River. But the whole idea came from, well, you, in many respects, you always thought it would have been great. Well, no, you give us the spiel, mate. What made you think of this idea called Bad River that I've now sort of taken and made a film series out of?
Rather than yet another movie, yet another book, yet another story about, going off on some wilderness-based journey where you don't see another soul, why not go to some rivers where they are heavily impacted by people and see what's happened?
Yeah, and that's what, spawned the idea. Go and paddle the sickest, unhealthiest water on the planet, or in this case in Australia.
Well, initially I think we discussed go to the Ganges, go to the mouth of the Hudson, go to the dry mouth of the Colorado where water's not even flowing out to the sea. But of course, not only is that a huge logistical exercise, it's not in your backyard.
Now the trouble with the idea of Bad River, Ponch, and in a sense my disposition, and for the most part yours too, is that I tend to see the good side of most things because I think life's better that way. I just think it's It's more fun, it's light.
And there should be great joy coming out of these kind of outdoor trips.
Yeah, that's right. So why would you then say, okay, I want to write a film series based on bad experiences? So they're actually not bad experiences. They're potentially sick water, or some of the sickest water in Australia. And this is not me saying this. This is research and Google and news articles and general knowledge, really. You can still have really wonderful, insightful, energized experiences where you get home and you feel good about life, even in bad rivers. I almost feel bad about saying that.
Yes.
So the first one I picked was the Cooks River. It's a fascinating story because it was essentially the first water source for the colony of Australia, and now it's considered the sickest urban river in Australia. Stay up, stay up. Where's the bottom? Where's the bottom? The very thing that supported life in the first place.
So Cooks River flows into Botany Bay.
Yes, its mouth now is in a very different spot to what it used to be. The airport, we've probably all had very close experiences with the Cooks River, which is the airport.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's runway number 1 or runway number 2, but you basically land on the river.
If you miss the runway, you're going to be in the river.
Yeah, it's been diverted. In the 20s and 30s, it was pretty much 2/3 of the river was concreted and made into a canal.
Yep.
And of course, before that, from the late 1800s through to those early 1900s, it was just a drain. And it was the outfall for heavy industry that was starting to crop up in Sydney.
So pretty typical.
Yeah.
Pretty typical for a lot of urban rivers that flow's got to be harnessed and managed, and you can't have it flood and all that sort of stuff. And so they're converted into concrete drains for rapid movement of water from one place to another.
It's just a slick-sided thing.
Yep.
And it was fascinating because there's a lot of rhetoric saying it's been cleaned up, but yes, it's still very sick. It will probably never get healthy again, at least not in the next 100 years, unless you drain it and take out all the mercury and lead and everything else. Pharmaceuticals, everything. It's a concoction. It is a bloody cocktail.
So how and where did you access the river?
I was led on a bit of a goose chase. I said to the crew, righto crew, I don't really want to recce this river. I want you to dump me in its headwaters and I've got to find it. And then I'll source it to the sea. And that's what I did. Took a full day of about 25 kilometres of journeying, and I stayed true to the old river itself.
Yep.
Until it got to the airport where it's diverted. And yes, it was really heartening to see some animals, some eels and fish and turtles and lots of bird life. That's made my day so far, that turtle. And I certainly saw some of the good bits that had been regenerated.
Yes.
But you can't help but to see that it's a fair bit of window dressing for something that's going to take a long time to fix as well. Well, let's move on to the next river, I suppose, mate. The so-called worst river in Australia, which is Finke River in Tassie.
Right.
Which is the outfall of the Mount Lyell mine, which has been going since the late 1800s. Copper, tin, you name it, all the sort of heavy metals.
So a lot of heavy metals and the most polluted river in the country.
Well, the river now is basically just a stream of acid.
Yes.
Yeah, nothing lives in it.
Yep.
So down I go, and it was remarkable because at one point, well, many points of the river, particularly down closer to where it joins the King, the Queen runs into the King, it was the magnificent Tasmania you come to know and love.
West coast of Tasmania.
Yeah. And yet the
forest.
water underneath me was unlivable.
It's inevitable that we are going to impact that on our environment. It's just that sometimes, particularly, and I think that the Queen and the King River is a case in point. We've probably all used or benefited from the metals that are mined, you know, in that part of the state.
I did that trip with a tin cup, and all throughout my phone and through the taps from that morning at the Airbnb was copper.
Yep.
You know, all of these lovely precious metals that Mount Lyell was so famous for. Yeah, it's a pillar of civilization, the stuff that came out of that hole.
Yep.
In a sense, good or bad. I totally agree. I'm part of this. We are part of the big web. How you remove yourself from a heavy metal life is bloody near impossible, I imagine.
Well, you know, one response is, oh, it's so far away, it's so remote, it doesn't really interest or impact me at all. You know, this little tiny speck of a place on the west coast of Tassie with this little river.
Yep.
I'm never going to go there. It's not going to impact on me.
Yep.
And so it's hard to be moved or concerned or care for, you know, a place you don't have any direct experience with.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's being a little bit simplistic and cynical, but I'm sure that's the reality for many of us.
No, well, what you just touched on then is the complete driver of going down a bad river is that I have an experience with it, quite an intimate one. I don't just read it in the newspaper or see it on a news feed. I go and get myself really dirty and filthy and experience this river. And I think it kind of gives you a little bit of street cred to have an opinion about that river.
Yes.
But more than that, it gives you an opinion that is probably more baited for something like a story. Even just a story. You can have an opinion now because you went and did it, and then people can take or leave your opinion or your story.
Exactly.
But fundamentally, you go to have an experience which feels genuine.
Beau, I think you've picked the day of the Southern 80 and the local fishing comp.
Yeah, to have a chat.
Yep, here comes Southern 80, mate. Scarper over there.
Roaring through.
Go that way, mate.
Bloody hell. So Ponch, the third river I went and investigated, which is another difficult one I felt guilty calling bad, a bit like this, is the Finke River in the Northern Territory. Now the Finke River is an ephemeral river. It flows only ever during big storm events or big rain events, every 1 to 10 years, big flows. But it's also considered the oldest river or riverbed in the world. Central Australia, it's been going for 350 to 400 odd million years. Which is an awful long time. Very old.
An awful long time. So, well, to put that into sort of some context, you know, the Finke really is in Central Australia and is surrounded by many millions of square miles of very, very dry desert.
Yes.
And so if ever there is a place where water is precious.
And so the reason it was hard to call a bad river is that it's not really bad yet. But it's the tip of the iceberg that climate change is really quite radically within 50 or 100 years changing the nature of the weather in centre of Australia, which of course changes all of the ecosystems.
Right.
And changes the nature of the river, from its temperature to its flow to what lives on it or doesn't.
It sounds to me, mate, like its future, its possibilities are no longer determined by, you know, the natural patterns around it. Its future is determined by global patterns, and we humans have changed them dramatically in the last 250 years.
That's right. So Central Australia has been lived in for tens of thousands of years by the Aboriginal population. These wonderful people going out there doing their thing, and then all of a sudden this big, it's like this alien force is being overlaid to their landscape because of everyone but them. You know, there's only 25 or 50,000 people that live out there. And yet the 7 billion people in the world burning our fossil fuels and doing all this big stuff, they're now getting 2 and 3 degrees hotter every summer.
Well, it's both a reality and a metaphor that if we don't accelerate that action to mitigate, you know, the effects we are having that are causing climate change, then all rivers are probably likely to become bad rivers.
I've got to change tack for a moment, Ponch. Given this is a podcast, we need to keep something light. You have Ponch's #1 tucker box written on your tucker box. How many bloody tucker boxes do you have?
Well, this is actually tucker box #2.
Okay. Which is half the reason I asked, because I've seen your old tucker box. It's got a fish painted on it. It's a lovely little tucker box. Now, what's going on? Why is this #1 or have you got a fleet of these things? What's going on?
Well, the old tucker box was kind of like the foundation tucker box. I actually saw some old film footage of Beau Miles, who was a legendary canoe traveller, philosopher and filmmaker in Canada. And on one of his old films called Water Walker, he lands in at camp and pops out a box, and in his box he's got his, you know, probably a pumpkin and his salt and pepper and bit of rice and off he goes and cooks up, and then he gets his easel up and does a painting. And I thought that's a pretty interesting way to go out and experience a place like a river or a lake.
Yep.
And it opens up more possibilities, you know. So that's where the tucker box came from. And then we started getting students to build and make tucker boxes. So I don't know why I named it the #1 tucker box.
Yeah, I'm tempted to get out a bloody hot bit of steel out of the fire and change that 1 to a 2. What a fraud.
But anyway, Ponch's tucker box it is.
Yeah, very good.
So, Beau, you come back from the Finke?
Yeah, so, and here we are, mate. We find ourselves on the final river of the Bad River series, the Murray. We chose the Murray because you have to go down the Murray. It's the most contested piece of water in Australia. It's our most important piece of water in Australia. And there's lots of good bits about it, but there's more bad bits about it, and that's why we're here. You've had so many wonderful experiences on this river. It was what you came here to atone almost the suffering of your PhD, and you paddled for months on end to get to the mouth and have this very lived experience rather than one through a computer screen. I mean, you wrote your book of poetry, and it's called The Song of the Wounded River.
Well, I think about the title of Wounded. Wounded or bad. So some wounds are fatal. Some wounds can be treated and healed. Can something be two things at the same time? Like I can sit here and see great beauty in the landscape in front of us. We've got the wind rippling over, creating the wavelets we're paddling into. We've got 2 corridors of green down either sides, reeds and gum trees, river red gums, and above that, this great big arch of a blue sky above. I think then on the other side of that tipping point, there's some of the things that we've sort of seen on this journey. Walking through campsites with just bagged up rubbish or tents that have been abandoned. Lots of plastic and refuse floating in the river. So, and I think you're quite right to say that what we're seeing here 100 years ago would have been very, very, very different.
Ponch, we've got to wrap things up, but thanks, mate. Any last thoughts or last things to say about the Murray, this Bad River experience, anything at all?
I think the ultimate one for me is that the river's become a highly regulated river.
Yep.
We are flowing downstream now at the end of summer when the river should be still and quiet and probably just a series of pools and not moving very fast.
Yeah.
But all this water's being pushed down river for irrigation. We've reversed its natural flow cycle.
Yep.
From winter and spring floods to an artificial summer flood. And I think then many of those other problems of salinity and deforestation and ecological issues, quite a lot of that can stem from the fact that we've completely harnessed and regulated this river. And if you talk of its badness, for example, that's probably the essence of it.
Well, that's it, folks. Thanks for being with me on the Murray with my great mate Ponch. And gee, food for thought, eh? It's been a good 4 days with you, mate.
Real nice.
I don't know about my decision to bugger off on a scooter. I think that was a little bit of a stunt.
Well, Beau's a quirky and passionate fella. You don't have to spend too much time with Beau to work out that he's an eternal optimist. He's always looking for the bright side. But it's good to see him get angry and upset about something every now and again. It just shows how much he cares. How much he cares about his backyard and the planet. And I think that really has come through in his Bad River series. I'm sure Beau and I could sit by the river and talk about it for hours. But YouTube is a short film format, and you need to get your message across. Beau's a gifted storyteller. I saw that working with him as an educator and a writer. He never takes his audience for granted. A good educator starts with the learner. It's called learner-centred pedagogy. Beau's taken the same approach with his filmmaking. He starts with the audience, picks them up, engages them and takes them on a journey. And that's what he's done with the Bad River series. It's not a comfortable journey by any means. You know, part of the hardship and discomfort, it's got to be there. It's got to be there to make the journey real. And as a storyteller using film, I think he lives by the saying, show, don't tell, wherever possible. Show how much you can live beautifully on a river just by travelling slowly, taking care, living off produce from the catchment. You know, show how it takes effort to have an experience. It's not always easy. Discomfort and hardship is part of the journey. It's what makes the sweet moments even sweeter. And I think importantly, you know, what Beau's done in his Bad River series is show how important it is to reflect deeply and meaningfully on those experiences. To draw the lessons out of those experiences that change your life or that make you think about how to live your life. I think Beau's Bad River series is one of his best. And that's not just because I love rivers and love being out and about with Beau. You know, Beau's not shied away from how contested and contentious these rivers are and how reliant we are upon them just for our very existence. On a river like the Murray, you know, we as a nation are still searching for balance. Balance in using water for farming and production, and balance for sustaining a healthy river and an environment, which we also need to live on. Some farming practices have made incredible progress towards sustainability. And in terms of managing the whole basin, there are now wetlands that we are in the process of rehabilitating. But it's true that there are also large sections of a river like the Murray that have abandoned farms and ruined landscapes. And we've got a long way to go to rehabilitate those landscapes and say that we are living with a healthy river. I think Beau's Bad River series raises these important questions. And as always, there's the underlying implicit message. You know, get out in the world, experience it in all its rawness. Sit and take a few moments to appreciate its splendour. I think that's Beau's Bad River experience in a nutshell.